Thank you, Jen. So good to be with all of you. I'm Bruce Pardoe, one of the teachers. For Mountain Stream, I used to live out in the area. And now I'm going to guide us through 30 minutes of meditation and sitting, and then we'll have a break and a Dharma reflection. Hopefully, some time for Q&A, and we'll end with metta. So happy to be with all of you from Chile, Virginia. So, anyways, the first thing is allowing your eyes to close if that feels safe, and just really allowing the attention to settle in and kind of settle into your body and feeling your posture and noticing if there's any ways to bring any more ease or relaxation. And yet at the same time, there's a sense of presence, of interest, of almost an alertness, noticing if there's any areas of attention and if it's possible to adjust or bring the breath to those areas to invite opening, relaxation, and just being kind and gentle with yourself during the sitting period so that if you need to adjust, you can do it, but do it mindfully. Be aware that you're going to adjust your position before you just kind of do it, if you need to do it. And one thing I like to reflect on as I begin to sit is just my intention. I'm here because I care about myself and doing something for my benefit and well being. Maybe there's a benefit and to the well being of others. Or maybe your intention's quite different. Whatever it is, just kind of acknowledging what motivated you to be here tonight. And sort of this sense of permission to, knowing that as much as our attention gets drawn into the complexity of life, that we're doing something profound and impactful for ourselves by doing this radical thing of turning the attention inwards and just being here and now, training our attention to kind of have a softness and a present moment orientation, allowing what's happening without being stuck to it. And so to cultivate this sense of presence and just curiosity, bringing the attention into the body and just exploring your breathing process. It's a great way of oftentimes for many people, it's the most noticeable process happening when we close our eyes and we're quiet. Can there be this sense of freshness and discovery with your breath? And we just kind of use this as maybe sort of a home base, an anchor, when the attention wanders, as its habit often is, that we can sort of kindly return to the breath, return to our practice, And just like we would be patient with a puppy learning to go on the paper, we can also be patient with this wandering mind and allow it some space and time just to arrive and settle into practice. So let's take a few moments just to be with the breath, and then I'll have a little bit more to share about practice. And there's no particular kind of breath that we're practicing. We're just helping the attention stay connected with it, just kind of receiving the breath just as it is. This process of breathing. And having perhaps established a little bit of a connection with the breath, the breathing process, we can acknowledge that to sort of stabilize our attention in the present moment, we can always come back to it. But I'm also going to extend an invitation to open up and feel a little bit more of yourself. We kind of feel our physicality, including the breath, by noticing temperature, elements of heat or cool. Sometimes the breath feels cool at my nostrils and warm in my throat area. I might also notice in my larger sense of my body that there's sensations of weight places where there's contact between my body and what I'm sitting on, how my hands are folded. I might feel heaviness or lightness in some places, hardness or softness. And in addition to temperature and weight, there's also the sense of movement. Again, we can really feel that with our breaths, the moving in, the passing out, the rising and falling of our abdomens, maybe the expanding of our chests. We also might feel movement in some of the pulses and flows, something gurgling in our belly. You might feel your heart, or sometimes feel tingling some areas. These are all forms of movement. And so we can open up the attention at our bodies and notice these areas of the weight and temperature and movement. And really, this is kind of, in a sense, our physical felt sense of the body, how we know we have a body when our eyes are closed. The wonderful thing about the body and the breath and is that it also we experience just here, just now, in this present moment. And if the attention wanders, gets caught by the thinking process, we can go back to the breath and let it stabilize and see if it's okay to open up to the body again. And we notice that sounds are happening, maybe images, sights play across the field of our mind, thoughts flit through. And we can just kind of, in a sense, sit in the middle of all of it, sort of, I find being grounded by the body and breath, and letting the other elements, sounds, images, thoughts, just kind of moving through as we're just present to the fullness of what it is to have a moment of human experience. And so we have this technique, this possibility of being able to settle in with one discrete thing like the breath, or open to the fullness of the moment, just noticing, kind of staying grounded in the body and acknowledging other elements that are flowing through. And if we get lost, just kindly and gently returning. And so we sit And if the attention is wandered, just this gentle return, this willingness to start again, and maybe coming back to the breath and taking some time to stabilize, seeing if it's okay to open or just stay with the breath. You are the artist of your practice. So there'll be a 5 minute break, and there's bathrooms for those who need them, tea. And I imagine someone will ring a bell in the hall when it's time to reconvene, and I'll start yakking for the Zoomers. I'll see you in a few minutes. Be careful. See if you can maintain your mindfulness in a relaxed way. So I hope someone is ringing the bell there for the folks at the center, and when I see people start to gather in numbers again, I'll start off at you. And may I just say again, what a pleasure it is to be with you all and see the tankas in the background. And I know that room you're sitting in, and I know the feeling of being on Zoom for all of us in the Zoomosphere. I spend a lot of time on this platform. It's become a good friend. So, one of the great things about being here in Virginia is that it falls on the pathway. I'm sure many of you might be aware of the Vietnamese monks who started from Fort Worth, Texas, and today was their 100th day and of being on the road, and they arrived here in Richmond, Virginia. So these are 19 monks in the Vipassana tradition, our tradition, Vietnamese. They are Vietnamese, and it's been so profound. I think I looked in, they've got 1.7, or they had this as of yesterday, 1.7 million followers on Instagram. Um, they're just touching so many people's hearts and lives. This simple act of walking for peace and presence, mindfulness, loving kindness. Um, I had the very good fortune of going down and seeing them as they were getting lunch about an hour south of Richmond a few days ago. And now today being with thousands of people as the governor of the state of Virginia came out to acknowledge and thank them. And just this outpouring. So, in a sense, this talk tonight, where wisdom and love become one, uh, it's dedicated to their example of that truth. And so, um, you know, our situation these days, it just for so many people, there's so much that's stirred up, and we need some reflections to help us nurture and support ourselves um, as we meet both ourselves and our world, our challenging time, our reactions and responses to it. So, um, in a sense, their presence is kind of an antidote for the experience of these days. And I hope you find this talk useful. So, I remember where I first was introduced to the idea of where love and wisdom become one was I was on a 3 month meditation retreat back in 2010 in Massachusetts. And on this retreat, I'd noticed there was a young yogi, and he just kind of looked to me like he was sort of tight. And I had this, you know, judgment come up in my mind. Oh, yeah, that guy, he's really striving. And so I judged him. And then the morning questions came along. So at the beginning of the first set after breakfast, it's a guided sit with an opportunity for some questions and answers. And at the end of it, and he raised his hand and began speaking, and he said, I'm 19 years old, and I'm here. And I was just so struck by that, 19 years old. And he said, and then what he said really floored me. And he said, and I'm practicing metta. I'm using this as a metta retreat. That means 3 months of a 19-year-old's life spent doing basically nothing but generating or feeling opening to loving kindness for every waking moment of every day of his 3 month retreat. And the question that he asked was so sincere. The qualities of wisdom had been so prominent on the retreat. And he said, I'm practicing metta, and can love take me to full awakening? You're talking about wisdom so much. Can love get me there? And Joseph Goldstein, one of the wonderful teachers in our tradition, um, was the one who was answering the question that day. And he said, there was this practitioner, Deepama, who reached very high stages of enlightenment. And she was a teacher and mentor to Joseph and many other Vipassana teachers here in the West. And he said, he was speaking with Deepama one day, and she had said to him, at a certain point, love and wisdom become one. And when I heard that, I was just so struck by it. It became one of the kind of themes in my practice and in my inquiry. And it struck me, deeply that it was a profound truth. And I remember T.S. Eliot said that genuine poetry can communicate before it is understood. And as I've explored it, I've come to realize that, this understanding of where love and wisdom become one is not something that's just kind of reserved for those beings who have achieved profound stages of enlightenment, but it's something that's also available to us in our everyday experience, and that we kind of, in a sense, intuitively know. I had a similar experience of being inspired or feeling a resonance with a teaching when I was on a month-long retreat that Jack Kornfield and John Travis were teaching. John Travis is our founding teacher, and Jack is like Joseph Goldstein, or one of the early practitioners from the West to bring Vipassana Buddhism back to the West. Um, in any event, he was telling a very beautiful story about Mahagosananda, who he had practiced with in Thailand, and it just struck me so profoundly. I'm going to share it in the same way that Jack does. Um, and so when he was with Mahagosananda, this is at the same time that the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia erupted into their genocidal rampage. And I think they ended up slaughtering like 1.8 million people. And the first people that they went after were the monks and any intellectuals, any people in the teachers, and so on and so forth. Um, and so everyone in Mahagosananda's immediate family, 17 people, were killed. And the people came streaming out of Cambodia, the refugees, into refugee centers in Thailand and Laos. And so Mahagosananda said, we must go to these refugee centers. And when he arrived there and saw the people fleeing the genocide, he immediately felt that these people, what they really need is the Dhamma. They need to hear the teachings. And so he had some pamphlets or leaflets printed up and passed around to the camp. And they set a day and a time for a gathering for of community of the Dhamma, the Sangha. And but the Khmer Rouge had actually infiltrated the refugee camp, and they put out the word, which Mahagosananda and Jack Cornfield became aware of, that anyone who attended the gathering would be killed. And so on the appointed day and hour, they had no idea whether, anyone would show up. And, but as it turned out, the entire camp, 25,000 people, came to hear the teachings of the Buddha. And so as Mahagosananda stood up in front of these people, Jack was wondering what he could possibly say in the face of such suffering. These people that had been through a genocide and were reduced to, maybe an uncle and a niece or a grandmother and grandson from these large ebullient families. And so Mahagosananda just began chanting the second verse of the Dhammapada, which is a collection of the Buddha's sort of shorter sayings and teachings. He just began chanting, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law. Hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And there he was without preamble or any other decoration, just offering this over and over again. And slowly but surely, 25,000 traumatized people began to join in with him. And they were all saying, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And this just so deeply struck me. I mean, I was on retreat and my heart was wide open, but it so deeply struck me because these people who've just been through an unspeakable horror, uh, implicit in this is a sense of forgiveness. And how can you not hate people who have done such a horrible thing? And so Jack said, Mahagosananda, it was so profound in that moment there was healing. And it was so profound because Mahagosananda spoke to a truth that was even larger than their suffering. And what occurred to me is that Mahagosananda had spoken to a truth uh, he'd spoken to the only thing within them that could not be crushed, their hearts. And so this became for me kind of an axis, like the earth spins on an axis. It's an axis around at some level which my life revolves. And as I continue to think about it, the figure of Mahagosananda, who is the kind of became the head, the patriarch of Buddhism in Cambodia, and many other really profound acts of love and wisdom from him. Um, but as I played around with this, I recognized, oh, wait a second. When I feel at the organic, at the felt lived level, when I feel hatred, I feel contraction. When I feel love, I feel openness and expansion. You cannot heal or relieve a contraction with more of the same. I mean, look at some of the conflicts that have been going on interminably, in the Middle East, around the Palestinians. Um, you know, it just you look around the world and you see it playing out in these times of division almost everywhere. So, understanding it at this level of you can't relieve a contraction with more of the same, uh, it's kind of like a law of nature, like gravity is a law of nature. Um, and I'm reminded, Dhamma in its most literal translation it means how things are, the way things are. So love with its expansive quality is really the action of love is to include, and that of hatred or of aversion is to exclude, is to close off from and to divide. Does this sound familiar? So in a way, you could almost say exclusion never ceases by exclusion, but by inclusion alone is healed. But this can't be blind inclusion saying everything is right. There has to be wisdom that's part of that inclusion. And so that involves discernment. And it raises the question, does love have wisdom in it? The Tibetans say that there's two wings of the Dharma, and they are love and compassion, or excuse me, wisdom and compassion, wisdom and love. And so, in a way, this is acknowledging two aspects, but they're really two aspects of the same thing. If I was holding up a blue ball, I could point to it and say, "Oh, it's a sphere, but it's also blue." So they're two aspects, of the same thing. And as we begin to recognize and explore the potential unity of wisdom and love, their power grows, and we begin to find that wisdom isn't something we create, but rather, like love, is something that is already there. As a matter of fact, the most literal translation, I read this from a translation that Gil Fronsdal, another teacher in our tradition, had done. And the most literal translation of that is that hatred never ceases by hatred, but by non-hatred alone is healed. And so when there is not hatred present, what is actually there is love. Love is, kind of fundamental. Inclusion is fundamental. The exclusion is something that is added to the experience. So love, wisdom, when we do loving kindness practice, which we'll do at the end of this evening, it's not so much, initially it's about maybe kind of generating or but it's more about opening to something that's already within us that we don't have to create, that we don't have to be worthy of, that's already a fundamental aspect of ourselves. When we feel that something is wise and skillful or helpful, we might feel a sense of alignment or ease. Typically, when we feel things, and we feel that with love, typically when we feel, things that when we're considering things that, may not be so skillful, may not have such wisdom or kindness, there's some kind of there's some kind of a tension, some kind of a nagging feeling about it. Um, but we can begin, to see the power and the transformative quality. And it's not like, love isn't necessarily, it's often associated, I think, in our culture as being something, oh, it's weak and, uh, it's not, it doesn't have strength, but love can be very, very fierce. Compassion can be fierce. When a 3-year-old is walking into a busy street, we don't go, oh, hey, well, we think, we go, stop. We might grab onto them and protect them. In the same way, compassion can be fierce in its ability to act as wisdom can. And so we see this power and this sense of strength, in the actions of the monks. They're not against anything. They're for peace, which is developed by cultivating mindfulness a sense of spaciousness, which reveals the love and the wisdom that are inherent to us, uh, and helps us open to that peace that's there for, it's our birthright. It's interesting as I, stood by the monks as they've walked through, it's like this wall or wave of power and peace moving through, and I feel myself move to tears. After the lunch that I had the grace and fortune to attend, there was a woman whose son had recently died, and she had a T-shirt on with him, a picture of him on it, and she was talking. She was really being with one of the monks, and he really wasn't saying anything much or profound. He was just being with her, and you just felt this wave of peace touching her and everyone around, and she just trembled with the power of that inclusion, and that's really what she needed. So in our tradition, one of the core ways in which wisdom is one of the core wisdom teachings is that there's three characteristics of every moment of experience, that they're called anicca, which is change, anatta, which is not self or kind of impersonality, and dukkha, which is suffering or unsatisfactoriness. And they really kind of boil down to just recognizing things that we sort of know, but have a hard time embracing at a default level. So anicca, change, just recognizes that everything is changing in every moment of experience. And then anatta is recognizing, and it's not personal. There's kind of, and this can be one of the most difficult and kind of mind-bending way insights and wisdom teachings of Buddhism, that there's no essential self. We have this feeling, but wait, there's a me in here. Well, actually, as we explore, there's a sense of familiarity, but when we bring our attention just to moment by moment, we recognize, oh, wait a second, there's kind of a collection of processes unfolding. There's no man behind the curtain, and and we begin to develop this sense of, oh, wait, there's a different way of holding experience rather than having this fixed self of a me in here and that out there. And so, if reality is changing in every moment, and it's also impersonal, meaning there's not some kind of a controller, if we do try to keep things just how we want them by getting more of what we like, which is greed, and keeping away what we don't like, which is hatred, excluding, it's a doomed task. And, we just suffer. It's stressful. We're constantly not being able to achieve the goal, and it hurts. So, when we can feel this deeply again and again and again and let go of these default sort of strategies, that's what the Buddha called freedom. And we can feel it in kind of expanding ways as our practice unfolds until we can feel it to the ultimate peace. So I want to look and focus for the rest of my share on the strategy of hatred or aversion, and that we employ, and how it relates to the wisdom factor of impersonality or anatta, and how love helps us see and feel them clearly and allow the hatred to relax, and that we can open up and feel this inclusive nature of anatta. It's kind of like, oh, wait, if there's not a limited sense of me in here, then there's kind of a unity that's happening. And not self doesn't mean no self. It means simply something is happening that is other than self. And we recognize when we recognize and begin to take in, oh, things are happening due to causes and conditions. When we see that there's, impersonally, that things are happening impersonally, then that relieves us of a sense of ownership and therefore the blame that goes along with the ownership. And we can get down to the business of actually moving towards peace. So when we feel hatred, we recognize it because we feel it. We feel the tension in our chest or our jaw or our belly, and there's the thoughts that go along with it. So the first job in dealing with hatred is to feel it clearly and get to know it. And really the first job of hatred is to know it within ourselves and towards ourselves. We use the term self as a label, but it's important to recognize that it is only that, just a label. So when we meet hatred in ourselves and we feel that tension, we meet it oftentimes in the form of self-judging or self-criticism, even self-hatred. And those aspects that really function because we're wired to want to be liked so we can survive in our group. And we're wired to be, to judge ourselves. Are we performing skillfully in a complex and dangerous world? So we're kind of constantly, going with, did I do okay? Um, can we recognize that when these happen, we might be able to shift the paradigm and go, oh, I'm trying to right my ship. I'm trying to protect myself. And instead of hooking on to them, it's like, I see, I'm trying to help myself. Can I just feel the tension of self-judging, self-criticism? And can I have kind of a sense of an inclusive, attentive mindfulness that maybe has this sense of spaciousness in it? Space in and of itself is at rest. It's still. There's all these in the open sky, the clouds are moving through and they're getting larger and smaller and sometimes lightning come out of them. But the sky is just this open stillness that holds them and allows them to pass through. So, can you feel that I invite you to just kind of bring that to the sense of your meditation? And especially when you're feeling these qualities, or when you then feel that towards the world around you. Um, it can be really important to have permission to drop the sense of the critic. The Dalai Lama was asked at a retreat one time. Um, the yogis asked him, I think it was at IM, at Insight Meditation Society up in Massachusetts, and they were on a retreat, and he stopped in for a day. And one of the questions was, how do I deal with self-hatred? And his response, he was confused. He had to get his interpreter to, you know, go over that with him and go through it. He had to take a big long pause because he was confused by the notion of self-hatred. And he was very clear and unambiguous in his response. He said, "This is incorrect. This is harmful." So we have permission to actually interrupt something that we've thought we've needed. Um, and I love the words of the Buddha. He said, you can search the whole universe over and for someone more deserving of your love and compassion, and that being is not to be found. So as we deal with our inner hatred, can begin to deal with the hatred and the stress, the aversion that we might feel for the world around us. We become more ready to include what's outside of us, and maybe we can drop the judging. So if we're not separated out, then there's a hole that we can open to. And I love the words of Dr. King, who said that he saw that unity so clearly when he said that all life is interrelated. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all. As long as there is poverty in this world, no man can be totally rich, even if he has $1 billion. As long as diseases are rampant and millions of people cannot expect to live more than 20 or 30 years, no man can be totally healthy, even if he just got a clean bill of health from the finest clinic in America. Strangely enough, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. I think we feel this sense of the wisdom of love and unity uh, when we recognize that where we get a lot of our most meaningful satisfaction and happiness is when we're serving others or when we're being generous. And that's why the practice of dana, generosity, is often offered as a really deep practice for you to open to. It's so profound, such a core aspect of our tradition. Um, the Dalai Lama says ultimately he's a greedy person because he recognized that the highest happiness is serving others, and so he's devoted his life to it. And in thinking about holding resentment, I mean, or yeah, in thinking about the hatred or the judging that we might feel for the world around us, I'm just reminded that there's a saying that holding resentment is like drinking a cup of poison yourself and hoping the other person dies from it. An extreme example of this was a story I heard of Tibetan nuns who, at the time of the Chinese invasion, uh, they had been caught by some Chinese soldiers. And as they were being raped by the soldiers, they were praying for the harm they were doing to their karma. So that's kind of extraordinary things. And, we hear this from exemplars like Martin Luther King, the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan nuns. But we also see it in ordinary and yet extraordinary moments. And there's a really beautiful story. Jack Cornfield put together a collection of reflections and stories in a book called The Art of Forgiveness, Loving Kindness, and Peace. And this is one of them. I stand by the bed where a young woman lies, her face post-operative, her mouth twisted, a tiny twig of the facial nerve, the one to the muscles of her mouth, has been severed. She will be thus from now on. As surgeon, I had followed with religious fervor the curve of her flesh. Nevertheless, to remove the tumor in her cheek, I had to cut a little nerve. Her young husband is in the room. He stands on the opposite side of the bed, and together they seem to dwell in the evening lamplight, isolated from me, private. Who are they, I ask myself, he and this wry mouth who gaze and touch each other so generously? The woman asks me, will my mouth always be like this? Yes, I say. It is because the nerve was cut. She nods and is silent. But the young man smiles. I like it, he says. It's kind of cute. All at once, I know who he is. I understand, and I lower my gaze. One is not bold in an encounter with a god. Unmindful of my presence, He bends to kiss her crooked mouth, and I'm so close I can see how he twists his own lips to accommodate hers, to show her that their kiss still works. I remember that the gods appeared in ancient Greece as mortals, and I hold my breath and let the wonder in. So that's not an enlightened being. That's one of us. Wisdom and love are one in our everyday actions. Can we move forward like we move forward in relationship to gravity in every moment with this reflection that hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed? This is the ancient and eternal law. And recognize that grasping this wisdom leads all the way to the final stage of enlightenment, where love and wisdom truly are one. And it asks us the question, what can't you include? That's where the edge of your practice, your freedom, and really the future of our world lie. So that's my reflection. And I have time to hear from you, both in the Zoomosphere and the hall. So if anybody has a question or a reflection or anything at all.
Bruce, this is Jen from the meditation hall. Oh, hold on. We're having a mic transition.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have a question from the floor. Can you say your name first?
Bruce, it's Bodie.
Hi, Bodie.
Hey, good to see you.
Good to see you, man.
I just loved your talk today. I'm here with my mother, and I just
Mm.
wanted to say how on point that was. I appreciate it so much. Bless you.
Thank you for sharing, Bodie.
Hello.
Bless you.
Yeah, bless you.
Great. I can see the Zoomers now. So if you want to either wave a real hand or wave a virtual hand, we can call on you. Bruce, I have a reflection, which is I think that there's something so beautiful about the way that the monks have taken on this walk of peace. And then there's also something so refreshing about kind of I want to say like the family movie style in which we're just like seeing them do their thing. And it's not these horrible short bites. There's not like this quickness or this immediate, like, swipe left, blah, blah, blah. Just there's nothing quick or kind of instant or simplistic. It's like the real deal. And even the way that you can hook in and watch them on these fast moving technologies, it's still like you can drop into it and find the authenticity and to some extent even feel what they're bringing. So it's really lovely to hear from you and your time with them directly, and it's also just a beautiful vehicle for your talk tonight, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Jen, for it's a lovely reflection, and it's so true. This is another way in which we have the wisdom already in us, that their simple act of kindness. When they started, people didn't understand what they were doing, and there was aversion. Sometimes things were thrown at them. Sometimes it was food, and it wasn't rotten, and so they actually put it in their begging bowls, some of the fruit. Um, but um, but they just walked on, and radiating loving kindness, and there's something within us and within the collective that has been so moved by this, and again, we know wisdom when we feel it, we know love when we feel it, and just the way people are moved and in the space that they bring for us, that tension of hatred in openness begins to soften and unwind and unravel, and and beautiful, wholesome, helpful qualities, skillful qualities like love expand in that space. And um, yeah, so it's a very, very profound gift. And having been up close with them and seeing this is taking a huge toll on them physically. Um, yeah. And today was their 100th day. So
Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah. Another friend in the hall. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Janice.
Hi, Janice.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to speak to or share around that there's something in what you said about it being a natural law of contraction and exclusion. Expanding and softening only through things that are expansive and softening, and that being love and wisdom and other higher qualities. And I don't know, I just wanted to address that when you called it a natural law, it just touched me in a way that I'm still kind of processing and feeling into and sensing into in a new way.
Mm, beautiful. And I think that's a really lovely. One thing you're highlighting is just, this allowing it to touch you, and you don't have to figure it out, you know. It's just that it's touched you.
Yeah.
So yeah. So and for me, that's been so much, similar to my process with these teachings as they continue to touch me and unfold and deepen and imbue my life in both beautiful and very powerful, skillful ways that help me navigate the complexity of life with more stability and kindness for myself, kindness for others. Yeah, so thank you. There's a great
Thank you.
there's a great quote by Rilke. It starts off, be patient with all that is unsolved in your heart and treat it like very, questions posed in a very foreign tongue. And for the goal is, or the purpose isn't to get the answer, but to live the question fully. Yeah. And I see Cindy Shaw, you have your hand up on Zoom. Cindy, do you want to unmute yourself and ask a question?
I do. Hi, Bruce. We miss
Hi,
you so much. And thank you. What a wonderful, as somebody said, brilliant talk. You kind of took us around the world real quick there, but yeah, thank you. And as usual, coming from your heart. And I remember you taking care of all the dogs in Dharamsala, for example. Um, so yeah, we just I mean, number one, wanted to let you know that we miss you. And I really appreciate your perspective. And thank you for sharing that you were with the monks today. And what strikes me about that is the contrast between what's sort of happening out there um, politically and culturally, and then the monks and their slow walking peace and their sort of growing, snowballing along, literally,
yeah.
growing and growing and growing with sentiment and people recognizing and not being threatened anymore. They like, we know where to find the threat and it's not with them. so your story about the mother who had lost her son was very touching, and probably just like one of many examples that we have no idea about, but that we are watching. So I hope you're happy where you're at. Hope you're staying warm, and thanks for a wonderful talk.
Thank you. And thanks for your kindness, Cindy. And I in my own musings about how things might be progressing for us as a species, I kind of look at us as a species the way that a child develops at some level, and going through sort of a narcissistic phase, where we come out and we think the world's revolving around us, and then whoop, we realize that there's a much bigger thing going on here, and to try and orient to it, we develop what's known as the rule-role mind around 5, 6, 7, and it's very right, wrong, good, bad, black, white, very dualistic, not a lot of nuance. And as we mature, we begin to see, oh, wait a second, there's shades of gray. And in our world, in a certain sense, we were at this kind of tribal and might makes right place for a very long time. It might still is having a huge impact. But then, a few hundred years ago, uh, sort of the age of reason began to dawn, the age of science, where we're going to figure it out and we're going to know precisely what's going on. And we've got extraordinary strides in science and reason, kind of the rule-role mind. And we could, we grow more food than we could feed the entire world currently, but somehow it's not getting out to everybody. And so we've got all the technology and the science for us to live in harmony on this planet, and yet we can't do it. And I think at some level, maybe we're entering into, slowly but surely, the age of wisdom, and where we've gone, development happens through challenge. And so this is just my thinking, but that these monks walking for peace are an example of that. There's a wonderful historian, Arnold Toynbee, who was kind of synthesized history across a lot of different cultures and civilizations. And he said, we may well look back on the 20th century and consider that the most profound event of the 20th century was the introduction of Buddhism to the West, because it's helping us, and this is me taking off now, because it's helping us explore with a really detailed map the possibility of wisdom and freedom and love as a powerful force that we can use and utilize in ways far beyond how it's been traditionally used. So, this is powerful stuff we're doing, and we just got a moment. So I'm going to end now with a moment of metta and really inviting you. One thing I love, love, love about metta, besides the beauty and the comfort of that word metta, such a sweet, lovely word. And I love the reflection that as we engage metta, just allow your eyes to gently close. And if there's any way your posture can be more comfortable, that you can be more at ease, just offering that to yourself. And really acknowledging that, you being here now, this is an act of love. You are giving yourself an act of love that directly uh, includes and provides the space so that, that fearful part that gives rise to hatred or to greed, can just, oh, it's like, oh, wait, I can soften. There's something about this simple presence, open and allowing, inclusive like the heart, inclusive like love, having the wisdom to include. We can feel the resonance of that And so maybe we can also feel the kind of radiance, the warmth of that feeling into our hearts and letting them shine out, holding the monks in our hearts and letting them shine forth from our hearts. Holding each other as a sangha, like a lit candle that can light infinitely more candles. We allow this friendliness, this warmth, this kindness, this love, the wisdom of unity to touch all beings, seen and unseen, known and unknown, of any type, in any realm. All that is may be touched with our basic goodness that has one fundamental wish. That is that all beings everywhere be truly, truly happy. And that if there is any merit that we have generated today here in our practice and our time together, that we share it without reserve to all that is. May all beings be truly happy. So thank you so much for your practice and your good hearts, your attention. Blessings.
Thank you, Bruce, so much. Friends on Zoom, feel free to unmute if you'd like to